Hi folks, Paul from Map Deck Cycle Works here. Today's video is going to be about fasted riding. So we get asked this quite a lot by all our members, and to be fair, it's a subject we've always sort of shied away from. As a coaching team, it's normally we don't recommend it, but here's some helpful hints. But we're going to a little bit more depth and explain ourselves a little bit more in this video, and hopefully it will generate some more comments and questions where we can delve into the subject a little bit deeper. So I've got a little presentation sorted for you that I want to talk you through that will give you some of the whys and wherefores and hopefully some tips and things to consider if you're going to take on this idea. So what's the idea? The idea is to get faster and lighter on your bike by not eating before going for a ride. The idea of a fasted cardio exercise for weight loss and fat adaptation. So we're going to look at those two particular things, the reasons why. And let's have a look at some of the reasons why you might be considering this. So you've probably read some articles on Facebook or cycling magazines or YouTube or whatever it is that your source of inspiration for you to suddenly start to consider fasted riding. It's probably come from one of these four places. The first one is probably the most common. It's about losing weight, and I've put in there as a cut. This is a concept that's probably come a little bit more from bodybuilding, where they talk about cuts and build. They try and cut their body fat to lean up and look great for the front cover of a magazine or an Instagram shoot or whatever, and then they bulk up and build muscle and then go through this process. That sort of transferred a little bit into running and cycling, where we're trying to cut our weight rapidly for something. The other one is fat adaptation, and it's a term that's probably been coined from ultra endurance things, especially ultra running, and the idea is that we can start utilising fat stores as our energy source, which we'll go into quite a lot in this video. And the last two is maybe it's just because you like a bit of on the start line or before a ride going, yeah, I've been doing some fasted rides, you know, just to show you dedication to how hard it is you're taking your training, you're willing to not eat for it. And actually, sometimes it's just an excuse. Sometimes you go, not on it today. So the idea of trying out fasted riders and being a little bit underpowered is a bit of an excuse. So those two last things are legit. People, yeah, if that's the thing, then just reflect on it and maybe acknowledge it. But in this video, we are going to look at these top two. Okay. So what's the idea then? So the idea, the hypothesis, if you like, is if you can deprive your body of its preferred source of fuel, which is carbohydrate, glycogen, and by doing so, that will promote its use of more energy-rich fat stores. So if you think as a gram of carbohydrate or a gram of protein, you've probably got 4 calories per gram, whereas fat is dense, energy-rich, about 9 calories per gram. So if you're doing something mega ultra endurance where you need to carry your food, then being able to utilize that fat store means that you've got to carry an awful lot less food, process a lot less food, and so the benefits become quite clear to those sort of sports. And here we go, here's the hack. This is what we're going to try and do to your body, because your body's not necessarily designed to work like this, but we're going to try and hack it, because everything in the body is trainable, and the idea is that we can make your body do this. So how we do this is we're going to reduce our carbohydrate and calorie intake. Now the calorie intake thing is important because we'll get into the weight loss idea in a bit, but ultimately this idea sees carbohydrates as a bad thing. We're trying to deprive our body of that and get into our fat stores. We're going to ideally consume a similar amount of calories, but from more protein-based foods. Now proteins are even harder for the body to access than fats. So the idea is your body's been deprived of those, and it's going to start going for its most easily accessible energy store, which ultimately then is fat, hopefully. And then we do some exercise on top of that. And how much exercise is under just a little bit of debate. So in some fields, especially in sort of the CrossFit and gym goers, it's about doing HIIT, high intensity interval training, short bursts of very high intensity, doing it fasted to absolutely fire up your metabolism early in the morning, get everything going, and then have your meal in the morning. Another way of looking at it is to go for very easy, longer rides where you actually eat during that ride as well, like you would do normally, but you start in a fasted state. And a lot of this is still being debated and researched and that sort of things. But those are generally the two schools of thought: short and sharp, long and easy. Okay. This is how it works. So this diagram here is a little snapshot of a small part of our metabolism, and it's really good to understand what's going on here so we understand what it is that we're trying to achieve. So at the top here are our three fuel sources. So glucose, which is derived from carbohydrates, our lipids, which are derived from fats, and amino acids, which are derived from proteins or make up proteins. And our body normally goes for like glucose. This is the easiest way of getting glucose into energy. So energy on this diagram is shown in these little yellow bits here, 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 and here. And it's known as ATP, adenosine triphosphate. And that's a little molecule that actually makes your muscle twitch, which ultimately is what we're trying to do. It's just trying to get that molecule of energy into a muscle fiber to make that muscle contract. Whether that's in blinking an eye, flipping your fingers, pedaling a bike, whatever it is, that's ultimately what we're trying to do. Getting a little molecule of ATP into an energy cell, so a muscle cell, so that it can make a contraction. Now, when we're anaerobic, as in we're not breathing, we're not using oxygen, we can make about 2 ATP per molecule of glycogen. So, but there's byproducts of that as well, which is the lactate, etc., that we make for heavy legs. And this is like a little boost to our aerobic system. But when we introduce oxygen down here, we fire up what's known as the electron transfer chain, then like we can make up to 34 molecules of ATP per glycogen. Now these figures get debated a little bit, but the idea is that once you introduce oxygen, you get a whole lot more. So the idea is with fat adaptation is if we can deprive our body of this nice easy route into energy from glucose, your blood sugar levels, your glycogen that's rolling around in your blood, your body has to go and find another source of energy. And it will do that by finding its fat reserves. Remember, 9 calories per gram in there somewhere, and it needs to go through this process of beta oxidation to essentially become acetyl coenzyme A, which goes into our TCA cycle, Krebs cycle, citric acid cycle, call it what you want, and then eventually into electron transfer chain and produces energy. It's a longer, harder route to do it, but it's trainable in theory to be faster than it would be normally. On the other side of this is the amino acids. We can take energy from protein, and this NH3 is ammonia. So just be aware that when you're in this sort of state, you get that quite horrible sort of taste on your breath, and you're flooding your system with ammonia. So this is like body getting into real survival type of stuff, sort of things that you hear in like SAS survival stories and sort of things like that, as opposed to higher performance ideas. But this idea is getting a little bit of favour in ketosis, which is probably a video for another time, because fat adaptation is not ketosis. Okay, so get the idea. So we're trying to deprive this, feed this idea of fat coming into our system, and eventually get into this point where we're producing lots and lots of energy from a very high energy source of fat. Okay. Problem with this is that our body doesn't always give us the energy that we need for the amount of intensity. So intensity of the activity you're trying to do is dead important. So if you're familiar with things that we do down here with the Sufferfest, or working with Andy Coogan's things with FTP, etc., you'll be familiar with this sort of terminology. So in that very short sprint power that we are accessing our phosphagen system, that ATP. This is the sort of energy that you've got on hand, like stored in your energy, ready to go at a moment's notice. Fight or flight response, it's there, it's stored, and we've got a few seconds of that, and we can produce it quite quickly if we need to. It's actually made in the cell, but it only lasts 10, 15 seconds. You can train it to go a little bit longer, but not much. After that, while we're still anaerobic, remember no oxygen required, we can pick up this anaerobic system. This is the Krebs cycle, and get a little bit more energy out of it, up to about a minute's worth, maybe a bit longer if you train it specifically. And after that, you'll see this tapers off quite quickly as well. And then after that, our aerobic system has finally kicked in. It takes a bit of time to get that aerobic system kicked in, and that 34 molecules of ATP, remember, being thrown into your muscle cells for contraction. And remember, these sort of things stack up on each other as well, which we'll come to in a second. But that NP, neuromuscular power, that is what you've got on hand right now. Hammer it out. Anaerobic capacity that we talk about, this is how much you can produce anaerobically. Your maximum aerobic power is here, and your functional threshold powers, when we're using both those two together, but the byproducts of the anaerobic system is overloading, if you like, the aerobic system. Okay. Here's one thing to remember when you're going through this fat adaptation stage, is that your aerobic system still needs to have enough capacity to be a human. And it's got to perform, do the task at hand that you're asking to do, cycle a bike, run a race, whatever it is. You've also got to think, be cognitive aware, still got to run a digestive system and get fuel into your body. That needs energy as well. It's still got to process all the waste products of that. It's got to repair itself, because you're constantly, especially if you're doing sport, in a process of recuperation and repair. And it's still got to replenish the energy stores. Remember that ATP store, every time we deplete that, we've got to put it back in there again, ready for that flight or flight. And we know this because we can stay aerobic and then keep hitting repeated sprint efforts until eventually we just overload it. But I've put on there, if you want to be a jet fighter, you've got to do jet fuel. And this is a great metaphor, because this jet fighter has to slow down enough that it can take on more fuel than it's burning in order to replenish and actually stay in the sky. Okay. So the thing is, humans don't fall out of the sky, we just bonk instead. So this graph takes it on another stage to say what's going on. So there's that ATP system. This is the amount of power that we can hope to produce in the sport. Remember, you're still producing power if you're a runner or a rower. It's still force times velocity. Here's that critical phosphocreatine system that's kicking out a little bit of extra hour. Still not that neuromuscular response. And here's your anaerobic stage. Now, aerobic glycolysis, just working on the carbs that you've got inside, your blood sugar levels, will take you here, and you'll get this horrible, this is where that bonking feeling comes, as you're just like depleted. And then this lipolysis, your body starts to access those fat reserves. You start feeling a little bit better, to be honest, but look how low on power you are. You just haven't got that punch of energy that you need to really put power down, but it is a very sustainable. So if your level of exercise, i.e. zone 1, zone 2, fairly low intensity endurance riding, and it doesn't demand high peak power, then this is a very efficient store. Whenever you max this out, you need this glycolysis. So what fat adaptation you're trying to do is to hack this a bit more. One, that it starts earlier in the system, and two, that you're putting out a bit more power from it. Okay. Before we go too much further, you're thinking this is brilliant, remember that messing around with your body comes with some downsides. And are you prepared to cope with the hormone spikes and drops? Remember, all your hormones are controlled by what you eat. So here's I'm not a hormone expert, this is just a list of things that you're going to be considering and things that you might need to worry about. So first of all, you're going to deplete your glycogen, your blood sugar levels, and you're going to spike your insulin. That's your insulin that controls that, and you're going to be forcibly trying to change that through fasting and before you exercise, and then taking on exercise. Your T3 and your T4 control your metabolic rates as how quickly things spike up. Again, you're going to be messing around with that, and that's something to be aware of, because you're going to be eating at different times of the day, different amounts, and you're going to be playing with that. Testosterone and estrogen control an awful lot of things, definitely relating to energy levels, health and well-being, and do control a lot of things that are related to this. But two of the most obvious ones, probably serotonin, which controls your mood, and that actually gives you that carb craving. You know, when you leave here and you're like, after a really hard training session, and you're like, I just want to eat the fridge. That's all comes from your serotonin response. Like, your body burnt a lot of energy and it wants food. And fasted riding has got that problem, because you're going to finish your ride in that sort of fasted state, and you're just going to be like craving carbs, and it takes a strong will not to overcome those serotonin levels. And also the cortisol, the stress. You're going to be putting your body under a lot of highs and lows with this, which can build up that cortisol and that stress. So we'll come on to that a little bit more in a sec. I put adrenaline on there because a lot of the people who say you should do fasted riding say that it increases adrenaline, and by doing so it opens up your arteries and your veins and your blood vessels, basically. And and livened your centres and increases your metabolic rate. That's great. I would argue that if you're doing something high intensity and good fun, it would probably have exactly the same idea, so it doesn't hold a lot of weight with me. You're also going to be messing around with your growth hormones, because you're going to be depriving yourself of some food when it probably needs it in your sleep state, where it actually needs something to help with the repairing of your body while you're asleep. So there's quite a lot of things in there that probably shouldn't be messed with. Okay, if we're going to do this though, let's remember the basics, because this is stuff that's actually pretty well established. Remember, fuel your workouts for performance gains. If you're looking for performance gains, as in not a weight loss, but actually to gain more power, you need to fuel those workouts. That's the only way that you're going to get stronger, and your body will need carbohydrates to do that, because you're going to be overloading your fat system in order to be able to get those performance gains. So you are going to need to eat carbohydrates, and you need to eat the correct amount for the intensity and the duration. Remember, both those two things are important. As you raise your heart rate, you're going to be burning energy at a higher rate, therefore you need to be consuming enough to cover that. And the important thing is, if you're trying to manage your weight in all of this, is that it really is a very simple equation of calories in versus calories out. And if you're eating less calories than you are using in a day, you will lose weight. That's no two ways about it. If you're consuming more calories, then you're going to gain weight. Hashtag CFD, calorie fucking deficit. Look it up. There's a big trend on it online. It is probably the easiest way to understand a weight loss philosophy is calories in, calories out. Okay, also think about nourishing your recovery. It's still really important. I put nourish, think about good quality nourishing food, proteins, amino acids, because remember, the adaptation happens in recovery. So it's not in the training, even though you're flogging yourself on the bike or whatever, that doesn't make you faster. What makes you faster and better is the adaptation that happens while you're resting, and you need to be fueling that recovery. Eat, train, recover, repeat. Cool. Still on with it. Here's timing is critical. Here's basically some top tips. If you're going to take on some fasted ride, here's some things that you should really think about. First of all, ensure you have sufficient rest. You're not overstressed, overtrained. This is because you're going to start messing around with your cortisol, your serotonin levels. Be in a good place. Put a big smiley face next to that. Be in a happy place before you start this. If you're stressed, if you're worried about something, if you're anxious, any of those things, or even more, like, don't do this. Like, you're just going to make things worse for yourself. This is something that you do when you're feeling good. You've got everything else in life. You've got your good, healthy diet. This is the next level. This isn't something to do when you're already struggling with some other things. Here we go. Time your meals to ensure you have sufficient energy to be an effective human. Remember, with all of this, you still need to have a relationship, go to work, be a person. And if you're depriving that, we all know the term hangry, when you're tired and hungry, and what a mood that brings on. So there's no need to inflict that on yourself. Fuel to avoid bonking. Remember, fasted riding is not bonking. That's two different things. Fasted riding is playing with that sweet spot of trying to get your fat stores fired up, trying to tell your body, hey, you're on the edge of bonking here, like, sort yourself out. It's not bonking itself. So you still need to eat to avoid that bonking. And you definitely need to eat immediately after your ride. Even if you've been eating during your ride, you need to fuel that recovery, nourish that recovery, remember. And you should definitely consider getting your meals planned in advance. So that plan, do, review. This really is a system of learning when do you start, how long are you going to be fasting for, how many calories you need to do to get yourself through that fast, what sort of state you're going to enter your exercise in, how long, how hard, how intense is your exercise going to be, what are you going to eat at the end of that, and then review it. How did that feel? Was it enough? Was it too little at every single one of the stage? Go back to the planning and do it again. You really need to go through that reflective period of working out what you can adjust and what you can change to get this right. Cool. So you definitely want to know the risks in all of this if you're going to start doing fasted ride. Remember, you're going to be looking at some insulin spikes. You're going to be loading up your cortisol levels. Your serotonin is going to trigger your appetite. You need to have the willpower to get through all that. You're going to have some mood swings. You're going to make it fairly miserable for the people around you as you go through these mood swings, and you're going to try and deprive yourself of what your body's asking it for. If you're not careful, if you're eating a more of a fat-heavy diet, you definitely got to look after your cholesterol. That's something that's still, you just on and on and on and on. If you're going to do this, research it and know what you're getting yourself in for and whether you're prepared for that. And it is quite a slippery slope. You definitely hear reports of people, especially in the bodybuilding side, when they're going through cuts and builds, and when they're cutting, they often take other pharmaceuticals to overcome the effects of the cut. And it ends up in a very slippery slope very, very quickly, sadly. Still on with it? Definitely know the goal. What it is that you're actually trying to achieve. Don't go into it half-hearted. So if it is a body fat percentage, you want to get your body fat percentage down, whether it's for, I guess for a cyclist, whether you're racing and you want to be lighter, you're happy with your power output, but you want to be lighter. Remember, you are going to sacrifice some performance on a cut, but that might be what you're after. A short-term intermittent fasting, etc., is only going to be to very, very short-term gains. So know what your sustainable body fat percentage is. For most people, it's around 10 to 15% of body fat. I should be fairly happy there. Going much below 10 and you end up with all of these problems above, and it's something that you do for a very short period of time and then come back to being a normal, good, healthy state again. So know what those are for you. Recognize those signs of when you're at peak body fat percentage and when you're definitely below it, and know why you're there and how long you're going to be there for. Do you want that power? Do you want the weight loss or do you want the power gain? If you want the weight loss, then recognize the fact you're probably going to lose a little bit of power as you do it. Or if you want a power gain, there's no way you can do a cut on stuff either. So because you're prioritizing power, will be requiring more energy from your system to get there. And is it for weight loss or is it for fat adaptation? If it's for weight loss, then maybe a calorie deficit is going to work better for you, and taking on a better, more healthy diet, more than fasted riding is. If it's for fat adaptation, then know why it is you're trying to achieve that. If you've got something that's a big ultra endurance thing and you definitely want to become fat adaptation, then know that that's why you're doing it. Okay, and in which case you maintain your current weight and you're just trying to change your body's ability to burn a different fuel source. Just put a little note on there, this is not ketosis. Ketosis is something different. So fat adaptation and ketosis are two separate things, but they do quite often overlap and get a bit confused sometimes. We're not getting into that in this video. Okay, will it be worth it? So let's just have a look at this table. Okay, it's a little bit biased, but calorie intake, assuming is going to stay stable, you're sticking with your whatever exercise you're doing, plus your 2,500 calories a day or whatever it is to do that. If you just say, right, I'm just going to do a healthy diet, I'm going to eat good quality, nourishing food at the right amount of calories for my body and the exercise that I'm doing, that probably has a better long-term health benefit to you. If you're already doing that, then maybe you want to be considered. That comes first. If you want the energy to perform, i.e. you finish work and you want to go out for a ride with your mates, and you want to be able to put some energy bar down your mouth and crack on, then probably not for you. If you want to go to the gym and do your best, then that's probably not going to happen either. You're going to have to sacrifice some of that. So having a healthy diet and being able to have fuel up and get on with your energy, good. This good healthy diet is going to help your mental health massively by just looking after yourself better. Faster recovery times because you will be able to eat and have some fuel to help your body repair itself while you're sleeping. And if you want to build strength and actually get stronger, then this is the way to do it. On the other side of that, you will potentially be able to process your lipoids faster and access those fat reserves. Now, if you're already doing the healthy diet stuff and you're already happy with that, and you're now looking at a fat adaptation as a performance game for the sport that you're doing, then maybe it's worth it. does it work? So this is interesting. So a lot of the research on this is fairly anecdotal, by hearsay, or what people are reporting that they're doing in their training. The academic research around it at the moment is fairly insubstantial, to be honest. It's worth definitely a look. Get yourself onto PubMed and browse around those articles. There's some for, there's some against. All of them have got their issues. There's nothing that's really come across as simple as healthy diet, calorie deficit as a way to maintain. So if you want to believe this and go for it, just be ready for the long haul. Some people are reporting up to 12 weeks to try and become fat adapted, and there's a big lull, and normally around 7 or 8 weeks where everything just feels horrible, crash on through to the other side. But also remember that many people never make it to the other side. Maybe your genetic makeup will never get you there, in which case, know when to quit. Okay. On that note, that's it for me. I hope this has been a little worthwhile presentation. I hope you've enjoyed it. I hope it's sparked some questions. I'm definitely looking forward to hearing your feedback, what you think. Yeah. Cool. Thanks for listening, everybody. Goodbye.